another Thunder Thursday hangout here at the News OK studios. I'm Jenni Carlson, sitting in for Mike Sherman this week, and I'm joined by part of our Thunder coverage team. First up, from his apartment in Oklahoma City, Anthony Slater. AC, what's up?
Chilling above, I'd say not in Oklahoma City, above Oklahoma City, 13 floors up. Looking at downtown right now.
All right, above Oklahoma City he is. And from his house in Norman, Mr. Barry Trammell, who may have the lights out. I'm not sure what's happened to Barry's feed there. Barry, can you hear me?
There he is.
Barry,
I can hear you.
Barry, there he is. He's frozen, but he can hear us. So, Thunder Thursday, by the way, brought to you by Wheeler Chevrolet. Head down I-40 and save yourself some money at Wheeler. Guys, we have got lots to talk about. Obviously, we have now seen this revamped Thunder lineup with all its injuries, and seen it in a regular season game. The opener last night in Portland, a game that the Thunder was right there in the thick of until the fourth quarter when things seemed to kind of get away from them. Maybe a story that we see often repeated here as long as they have this many injuries. But Anthony, let's start with you. We have to start by talking about Russell Westbrook because the Thunder is not in that game if not for Russell Westbrook and his play. Finish this sentence for me for starters. Russell Westbrook most impressed me with?
His touch around the rim. Hubie Brown mentioned it a couple times in the broadcast. Earlier in his career, he's always been this athletic, this, reckless going to the rim. But early in his career, there was more of those, he'd get to the rim and he'd overshoot layups or bang them off, the backboard. He's really finishing well, smoothly with the left hand on a couple of drives. He hit a couple mid-range bankers. And just everything was kind of in rhythm. I know his shooting percentage wasn't great last night, but, he was just a terror for Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard really had no shot at guarding him. The game kind of changed a little bit, late when they had to switch Wes Matthews and Batum even at times onto Westbrook. And that's where the Thunder had some issues because they were able to hide Damian Lillard on, Andre Robertson or Perry Jones, who wasn't really doing anything.
Yeah, definitely he was impressive, as you mentioned, his defense on Lillard. Damian Lillard was a non-factor in the first half of that game, in large part because of Russell Westbrook. Barry, what about you? Finish that sentence. Russell Westbrook most impressed me with?
I think AC probably got the best one, but I think he really was. He impressed me with his patience. He never once got out of control. Never once took a bad shot. In fact, I came away thinking, Russell, if you wanted, it's okay with me. He got 6 assists with a team that didn't have Reggie Jackson, Kevin Durant, or Anthony Morrow, or Jeremy Lamb, or at all. Plus Serge Ibaka and Steven Adams not playing well. I don't know how he got 6 assists. So it was a superb start for Russell Westbrook.
Lance Thomas is how he got 6 assists, right?
Yeah, we'll talk more about Lance Thomas in a minute and some of these other guys that are names that we're talking about unexpectedly with all of these injuries. But I guess the question that we now have to ask, and Barry, I'll start with you on this one, the way Westbrook played last night, 38 points, as you mentioned, the 6 assists. He was all over the stat sheet. Let's be honest here. There's all sorts of numbers that we could throw out. But really the question is, how long can he keep this up? Barry, can this be maintained for the duration of Kevin Durant's injury and how long he's out?
I think he can play well, the entire season. I think he can play at his level. Now, he's not averaged 38 points a game and 6 assists. He's not Jordan. He's not Oscar Robertson in his prime, I don't think. But he's still a phenomenal player. I think, it seems to me that he has sort of assumed the leadership role. If you ask me, I've always sort of thought he was the leader of the team, but I think he's taken on the maturity that needs to go along with that role. I thought it was, a very good. Russell Westbrook is wanting to play this way in Durant's absence, and if he plays this way when Durant comes back, even better.
Yeah, at halftime they go to the locker room after an amazing first half show, and punctuated by Westbrook with that run-out dunk after the Blazers score with like 2 seconds left. He turns and sprints and catches the ball like a wide receiver from Nick Carlson, throws down a dunk with 3 Blazers trailing after him, and he's walking to the locker room. And I turned to my husband who was watching the game with me, and I said, somebody needs to give that guy a shoulder massage or a foot rub or something at halftime. He's gonna need some serious TLC, because that felt like that was carrying the world on his shoulders sort of first half performance. Anthony, can he keep it up throughout this whole time Durant is out?
Like Barry said, I think he's going to keep playing well. I think he's a top 5 player. He really had a tough match. Not Damian Lillard last night. He has Chris Paul tonight, another tough matchup. But these are some of the harder matchups he's going to face. So moving forward, I do think he's going to continue to play well. Problem was last night he didn't have any help. Serge Ibaka, 10 points, really didn't even look that into the game at times. Steven Adams didn't have a very good game. Perry Jones gave them nothing. I don't think he's going to have to score 38, especially against some lesser teams, moving forward when they get into a softer part of the schedule. And then I think he's going to get some help back, maybe some playmaking help. Reggie Jackson seems like he may not be too far away with an ankle injury. So I think he'll keep playing at a high level. I think last night he just kind of realized, it's got to be me at all times. And that's why he finished with 38.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned some of the themes that we'll hit on here, Anthony. And let's start with your guy. Sorry to bring up this subject, but hey, wasn't Steven Adams supposed to be somewhat of an offensive threat? We didn't see it last night, Anthony. What happened?
No, he looked a little lost, and more concerning than he had 8 points. If he averages 10 this year, that's fine. So
he hit some free throws too, which for him is a pretty good thing.
He did hit some free throws, and he had a little foul trouble, but it wasn't keeping him completely out of the game, and those were the 2 concerns going in. The problem I saw with Adams and really with Ibaka was they were kind of sloppy with the ball. They were a little confused. I mean, you can't really have 9 combined turnovers from your front line. That was kind of weird. And, Adams just really didn't seem as into the game as we've seen him. Maybe it's a one-time thing. We've seen him play well all preseason, so I think he'll be fine moving forward. Like Westbrook has a tough matchup tonight with Chris Paul. Adams has another really tough one facing the front line with Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. But I think he'll be fine, and I think his offense will be there. It's kind of predicated off others. And last night, nobody else was playing well. He wasn't really playing well. It was just kind of a bad start.
Well, Steven Adams ends up 3 for 4 from the floor, 2 of 3 from the free throw line, which again for him is not a bad night from the free throw line. But those 8 points, I think
they need more. Right now, they need more, and
especially early, Anthony. That's where I kind of thought he was really missing and seemed a little bit out of his element. But sort of playing off Steven Adams, Kendrick Perkins as a reserve. How did you feel like Perkins did his first night coming off the bench?
He looked a little bit more spry, I guess, if you can use that word ever for Kendrick Perkins, than we've seen. We remember people talked about he dropped some weight this offseason. I thought he looked fine, playing in the minutes he played. The thing is, it's kind of a tough situation for Kendrick Perkins because he's playing a role right now that he's not used to. He's used to being this lockdown kind of, post defender when he's surrounded by stars. Last night he's on the court. He's in there with the lineup of Sebastian Telfair, Nick Carlson, Lance Thomas, him, and Andre Robertson or Perry Jones. There was a couple times they legitimately ISO posted Kendrick Perkins up. That's not his strength, we'll say.
Probably not something that they'll do long term with that second unit with Kendrick Perkins for sure. Let's talk about some of the minutes that we saw played in that first game. Obviously I think we knew that Russell Westbrook was going to get a lot. He had a little over 32 minutes, but yet wasn't overused. There were times he probably could have been in there more, and they didn't sort of overextend him. But you saw guys like Andre Robertson, 34, almost 35 minutes. Lance Thomas, over 31 minutes. Is that the type of minutes, Perry Jones at 30, is that the type of minutes division that you expect to see The rest of this time, I mean, obviously we don't know, when are we going to see a Jeremy Lamb return, a Reggie Jackson return. But for the time being, was what you saw last night minutes-wise about what you think we're going to see moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to because the minutes got to go somewhere, really. Perry Jones wasn't playing well, and on most nights he probably wouldn't have been playing much at all, especially the way he was playing. But,
right.
There just wasn't really many other options to go to. Lance Thomas comes in, he plays kind of well, so Scott Brooks says, they have to play him 30 minutes. The only thing I didn't really like much about Brooks' rotations last night is he didn't really stagger Westbrook and Ibaka that well. I thought he was going to maybe stagger the starters, stagger their two best offensive players right now, which are Ibaka and Westbrook. But instead, he kind of was keeping them on a similar rotation, and then that's when you get lineups who, this is where in some points they lost the game, where you have lineups with it where Sebastian Telfair is having isolations, and Kendrick Perkins is getting post-ups, and there just wasn't anywhere to go in that rotation. There was no offense on the floor.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned Lance Thomas, and want to ask you about him and Perry Jones. But first, I want to remind people that you can join our Thunder conversation by going to newsok.com/live. We have a comment section there. You input your question, and we'll get to some of those if we have time here on the Hangout. Ask Anthony, hopefully get Barry back on and ask him as well. But bring us your questions. We'd love to answer them. What did you see last night? What are you expecting tonight against the Clippers? What do you want to know from our Thunder coverage team? I promised Lance Thomas and Perry Jones, Anthony. So last night, Lance Thomas, 7 of 10. Perry Jones, 1 of 9.
Yeah.
Who's the better NBA player here?
I think Perry Jones obviously long term has a brighter future. He has more potential talent than Lance Thomas. But right now, if you're Scott Brooks, I mean, who do you really trust more in the rotation? Lance Thomas came out there. He was high energy. He's making layups. He's playing with aggression. He's playing hard on defense. He's not super skilled, but he's catching and finishing. He's looking confident out there. Perry Jones, I mean, talented. We've seen it in spurts. We saw him score 41 points in the last 2 preseason games. But, I mean, when the bright stage is on, I mean, he kind of was lost out there. He was getting worked by Nicholas Batum. And he shot 1 of 9. It's been a struggle for him. It's right now. I mean, like I mentioned, I mean, if you're Scott Brooks, who do you trust more tonight? In crunch time, Lance Thomas, which it's crazy to say because Lance Thomas was a camp invitee who nobody even cared who he was
right.
2 weeks ago. But I might trust him more than Perry Jones tonight in crunch time.
Right. If you were, let's say, you get to wear Scott Brooks' designer glasses and his fancy suits. Oh
yeah, that's what I need some.
Let's say you are in that role. What do you tell Perry Jones? I mean, this is only one game. Let's remember that there's a lot of games left. It's not to say this is the be-all, end-all game. But if you're Scott Brooks and you get a chance to tell Perry Jones something, what do you tell him? What do you try to have him focus on to maybe settle in and start to show some of that talent that seems to be there but we never really seem to see?
I say I don't care if you foul out. I don't care, if you get 3 charges. Just go to the rim very hard. Be very aggressive on defense. Get in somebody's face. Just show some more aggression. He's got this more kind of a loopy look on his face. I mean, it's stuff we've talked about for what really because we cover Big 12 basketball or did. It's really stuff we've talked about back to his Baylor days. So. It's kind of an issue with him. It comes and goes. There's spurts, but I mean, isn't it really just an aggression thing and an assertiveness type thing? I mean, you watched the game last night.
Yeah, and I don't pretend to have the button to push, but I think that was the question when he left Baylor was, does he have the motor to be a great NBA player? You saw that skill, you saw that smoothness that he played with from time to time. But is he really going to get after it? And I think that remains to be seen. Daniel has chimed in on the live page here, newsok.com/live, and he asked the Perry Jones question. How close are we, or maybe the Thunder by extension, to giving up on Perry Jones? Is that getting close to that, Anthony?
Well, giving up is they already, exercised his, contract for next season. So they have him very cheaply under the next 2 years. You got to remember with Perry Jones, super athletic, seems to have a lot of basketball talent. Was originally, when he first got to Baylor, such a big, 5-star guy that was projected as a, lottery pick, top 10 type pick. But because of, like you mentioned, the motor and everything, he goes 29th overall, late first round. Later, then they got Andre Robertson. The same pick they got Josh Hustis this year, who's a project, is where they got Perry Jones. They have him very cheaply over the next 2 years. They're not giving up on him. And the thing, they're not invested that deeply in him, especially when they have a full deck of cards.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have to play that much. And it's not like he's a bust as far as where he was drafted. Right now, he's just forced into the rotation, and, he's just not playing well.
Yeah, and you think about when the Thunder drafted him, I think in my mind, he fit the Thunder mold when it came to athleticism, length, speed. Those sorts of things really fit. But, when you think about other guys that the Thunder have drafted in those late spots that have really been great fits, it's more about desire and want. And so while he fit the mold on some of those athletic things that you'd want to tick those boxes, the other stuff was a little bit of a stretch, and we're sort of seeing that play out a little bit with Perry Jones. If he just really played hard and aggressive, you have to think there'd be some rebounds at least that would fall into his hands and that he could go back up and score on. But it just seems like he's floating a little bit out there.
He floats. I think that's the best word for him. He kind of just floats.
Yeah.
During the game, and it's tough. I mean, he's a great guy, and maybe if he was locked into a, you put him on the Magic or the Bucks or somebody, and gave him more of an opportunity coming out of college, maybe he turns into something better. I don't know where his role is going to be this season, especially if everyone gets back and if Mitch McGary plays as it seems like he may play. I don't know where Perry Jones' role is.
Yeah, and Mitch McGary kind of fits that other mold. I mean, he is athletic, but he has the motor.
Oh yeah, big time motor. He may not have the guard skills that Jones have. He's not even really as tall as Perry Jones. Perry Jones is actually, I think an inch taller. And McGary's a 4, but I mean, like you mentioned, it's just a high motor, and you're not really worried when he's on the court. That's a guy that quietly I think the Thunder are really missing right now.
Yeah. Well, they might miss you if they had you under contract with all these injuries, Anthony. I don't know.
Hey, how about they get me under contract?
Sign you to a 10-day. Hey, this is Thunder Thursday, by the way. We're brought to you by Wheeler Chevrolet. Head down I-40 and check out their deals. Save yourself some money out there at Wheeler Chevrolet. Anthony, let's talk a little bit more about the opener last night, but then we want to turn the page because this is the second night of a back-to-back. Thunder back on the court tonight in LA against the Clippers. Another late start. They're trying to get us acclimated to those late playoff starts, apparently, in October, for crying out loud. But we'll get to that in a second. Okay, as you reflect on that opener last night, finish this sentence. My biggest fear about this team after one game is?
I would say the first month, is your biggest worry. Just because, especially if all of these injuries linger, maybe they'll get Jackson back soon, but let's say the Jackson and Lamb one linger for the next few weeks. These first 6 games, you could probably win that home opener against Denver and maybe the game in Brooklyn if Westbrook plays as well as he does. So that's a worry. And, as I'm speaking, I kind of thought of another fear. Serge Ibaka does not look that great. He did not look great in the preseason. He does not look like his normal self last night. I mean, he had the calf in the playoffs last year. He had a little hamstring issue in FIBA. He's had an ankle issue during the preseason. He just looks a little tentative, a little bit, just not like his typical self out there. And that's
We'll wait here for just a second to see if Anthony unfreezes. Are you with us, Anthony?
Yeah, I was talking about Serge. Did you hear that?
I heard a little bit of it, but I think you sort of cut out after you were talking about him coming back, obviously, from that injury last playoff.
Okay, yeah, I mean, calf, hamstring in the FIBA, and an ankle in the preseason. He hasn't looked very good, and 10-8 last night was not nearly enough, especially, with Durant out. You've come to expect his consistent numbers, and, it's just worrisome. We talk about him being this is his all-star year, this is his defensive player of the year.
Right.
Well, he got severely outplayed last night by an all-star in LaMarcus Aldridge, 27 points. Was clearly the better player of the two last night. He's going against Blake Griffin tonight, another good test. You're going to need Serge Ibaka to get back to his normal self.
Well, before we talk about Blake Griffin or Chris Paul or any of the Clippers, one quick question from our live page here. Ken has a question, and if you want to join us here, readers, listeners, watchers out there on newsok.com/live, you can ask Anthony a question as well. But Ken wants to know, with so limited available roster players right now, why can't the Thunder just call up Josh Huestis and give him some reps in the NBA? Anthony, obviously, Huestis the plan is to have him with the D-League team all year. Would there be any ability to bring him up and let him be on that NBA roster at all?
Well, you got two issues here. They're at 15. I mean, I know there's 9 available players, but the NBA doesn't work like the MLB where you can DL guys and put them on the DL, and then suddenly you got a roster spot. You got 15 roster spots. You got 6 guys hurt. You're not going to cut any of the 6 guys that are hurt, obviously.
Right.
So you're capped right now. You could cut Sebastian Telfair, or you could cut Lance Thomas, and bring Josh Huestis up, but you'd have to cut one of them. And then let's say you even decided to do that. Then suddenly you got a guaranteed contract in Josh Huestis. He's on for good. Remember, the thing about Josh Huestis is you didn't want to start his clock till next season, his guaranteed clock. But if you bring him, he's a first-round pick, so you automatically start the clock. I mean, he's guaranteed for the next 3-4 years.
Right.
So that's just the issue. It's just that kind of thing. Do you really want to waste that for when you expect guys to be coming back over the next month? None of these. The one thing we got to remember about all these injuries, having 6 guys out for a month may not be as bad as having 1 guy out for a year.
Right. Yeah, and as you say, I mean, if you're looking at who might they cut, I mean, Lance Thomas goes 7-10 last night. You don't think you want to cut him. And even though Sebastian Telfair wasn't great, he is your third-string point guard, and you've got to almost have that guy in a dire emergency like they're in right now, where you got to have that second-string point guard.
And not only is he their third-string point guard, right now he's their only perimeter player off the bench.
Right.
The other 3 bench players are Carlson, Lance Thomas, and Perkins, who are all big guys. Mm-hmm. He's the only, he had to play 20-something minutes last night. Didn't play well, but, yeah, you couldn't bring Huestis for Telfair.
One more off the live page, Anthony, before we start talking Clippers for a few minutes here. How do you think, this is from Peter, he says, Peter Griffin, I doubt that's from Family Guy, but Peter Griffin wants to know, how do you think the new implementation of that more ball movement styled offense can ease the loss of so many key players during this stretch? What about that, Anthony?
Well, I almost think that's kind of the issue, is the loss of key players. They were really implementing it, and it really kind of looked pretty good early in preseason. Mm-hmm. It was something to kind of get excited about if you're a Thunder fan. But, you lose Durant, the best. You lose 2 of your 3 ball handler playmakers, which are Durant and Reggie Jackson. Suddenly things they're just not how they were practiced to be. People are in roles they weren't expected to be. Andre Robertson suddenly has a ball more than he wants. It's just, I think it will be a good thing. And there was even times in the first half last night it looked pretty good. The ball was not sticking. But it's just, I think you're going to see the implementation of this more when they actually get the bodies back.
Right. All right, let's talk Clippers for a second. Obviously, a marquee matchup here. Unfortunately, an undermanned Thunder team as they go to LA to play the Clippers. That's another 9:30 tip for all you folks that want to go home and take a nap before the tip-off at 9:30. But the first question I have about this one, Anthony, is can the Thunder keep it close? Second night of a back-to-back. Clippers opening at home. The building's going to be hopping after the playoff series a year ago. Can these guys keep it close tonight?
Steve Ballmer going to be going nutty on the sideline. It's tough. I mean, they're 12-point underdogs in Vegas. I don't think I've seen them be that deep of underdogs since their first season here.
Probably not.
And it's warranted, really. All factors are kind of working against them. The Clippers opener. I could see them keeping it close. I could see, high energy to start. You expect Russell Westbrook to play well. You from a Thunder perspective, you hope Serge Ibaka has a better night. Maybe Steven Adams has a better night. I could see them keeping it close into the third, near the fourth quarter. But, I mean, like we saw last night, there's just fatigue's a factor. Those pockets of the game where Westbrook can't play are a huge issue. Mm-hmm. They got outscored badly when he was off the floor. So, I could see them maybe keeping it close for a while, but the depth of the Clippers against a Thunder team that's lost you can't take 5 rotation players off any team and expect them to compete on a back-to-back against one of the top 3-4 best teams in the NBA.
Right. And it's unfortunate too because as I looked at these first two games, I really thought it would be fun to see Steven Adams and Serge Ibaka go against Aldridge and Lopez last night in Portland, and then tonight against Griffin and DeAndre Jordan in LA. But obviously those two guys had their struggles last night. You gotta kind of wonder how are they going to do tonight. I was wishing that would be a little bit more of a marquee matchup. Now it's more of a question mark to me because we saw how much of a handful Jordan and Griffin were last year in the playoffs with Ibaka and Perk. So I don't know what to think about that matchup tonight.
Well, I think that's where you could potentially see them staying in the game. Is you need Westbrook to win his matchup with Chris Paul, and then you need your 2 big guys who are regardless of who's here or not with injury, those are now your 2 starting big guys. You need those 2 to win the frontline matchup against Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, which is a tough task on any night. But that's how you stay in the game. And that is really kind of what they may lose the game just because of the bench areas and the fatigue factor. But that's what I'm looking for tonight. How does that front line go against the Clippers' strong front line? And then, anytime you're watching Clippers Thunder, you want to watch Russell Westbrook, Chris Paul.
Well, and that leads us to our last question, which is kind of circular. We come back to where we started in Russell Westbrook. These 2 guys, it was a lot of fun last year in the playoffs to see them go head-to-head, each having some moments of sheer brilliance in that series a year ago. So, as you talk about these point guards and what we saw last night from Russell Westbrook, has Westbrook passed Chris Paul? Is he now the best point guard in the NBA? What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, remember that was such a debate media day when Brooks came out and called Westbrook the best point guard, and then Westbrook agreed. And then, you had this GM survey came out recently where they were the top 2, but Paul was voted the best overall. Personally, and I said it at the time of media day, I think Westbrook is the best point guard in the league. People talk pure point guard or scoring point guard or this or that. They're both labeled as point guards. They both play the point guard position for their team, and I just think Russell Westbrook's a better basketball player than Chris Paul at this point. I think and you can look back to the playoff series last year. He clearly won that matchup in that second-round Thunder Clippers series, and that's really kind of the reason the Thunder won that series. So I think if we have that to look back on, and just kind of what we saw Westbrook last night, and this isn't I'm not banging on Chris Paul at all. He's probably still a top 6, top 7 player in the entire NBA. Westbrook, you could argue Westbrook's the 3rd best player in the NBA. That could be a legit argument at this point.
Well, and as I'm sure you saw last night, and other people as well, Anthony, ESPN throwing up some stats as it relates to Russell Westbrook last year and Derrick Rose's MVP season, and they weren't that far off. Rose had a few more points a game, but when you look at field goal percentage and assists and all those sorts of measurables, it wasn't that far off. And remember, Westbrook's playing with Kevin Durant, who was the MVP a year ago. So that's really some impressive stuff to see.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The guy is a special talent. And, people still kind of mention, the Westbrook haters, the Westbrook doubters. I really don't even know if there's any more of those. At least any rational, enthusiasts of basketball can't hate on the guy. He has his flaws, but everyone has their flaws. Chris Paul's not 6'4". That's a flaw, right?
It would seem to be. Hey, by the way, parting shot, we've got a poll up on our live page right now. Best point guard in the NBA. You can weigh in of who you think the best point guard is in the NBA. Is it Russell Westbrook? Is it Chris Paul? Have your voice heard. Hey, thanks for joining us on Thunder Thursday. And remember, we're brought to you by Wheeler Chevrolet. Head down I-40 and save yourself some money. Thanks, Anthony.